Hello, welcome to the Pious Reflections podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Roberts. Today, I'm very excited about talking to you about an apparition of Mary that I have yet to meet anyone who has ever heard of this apparition in Russia, and it's going to be based on the Gulag. My books are all over the place. I'm trying to find my notes here. My stuff is coming through. Clearly, Hold on. This is embarrassing.
I'm just adding a third voice to the mix.
Yeah, that's a good idea. How am I still on there? Hold on. I'll find it. Where did it go? It's somewhere in there.
I'm just so thankful this isn't me.
Hold on. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. Act like nothing ever happened. Got to watch those trays. They can have a YouTube link in there, and you'll never know. Right. So, as I was saying, we are going to be talking about a Marian apparition that I guarantee you have never heard of before. I have yet to meet anybody who has ever met or talked about this apparition in the gulags well before they happened. And so I'm very excited to talk about that with people today. And so make sure you share this, like, subscribe, all those kinds of things. So that everybody ends up seeing it. We're also going to talk about the feminist movement and the communist movement and how they intertwine and how Our Lady may be the antidote for our current times, both morally and theologically. Stay tuned. All right, we're back. So, before we get started, I always start off with a little bit of brevity to go over some of the fun things happening on Twitter, and that was why I couldn't find my the actual link that was talking to me in the background, and you as well. But we are going. Is that you? Did you just do the thumbs up?
Yeah, that was
okay.
Oh, yeah.
So
I'm having a great time.
Yeah, I can tell. So we're going to take a look at this. First, I want to tell people what the inspiration was for why I'm doing this episode. There was this chart shared on X by The Rabbit Hole, which I highly recommend you follow. Lots of interesting statistics on this thread. And it basically made me realize that that a theory I had was that the cultural war that we are currently in is being the beachhead, so to speak, is in with women. And this mimics what happened in the Garden of Eden with Eve and Adam. The devil comes and he tempts Eve, and he leads her away from what God's plan is for mankind first. And so Eve is the first one tempted, and then Adam is the one who succumbs to that temptation later. And there's a lot of stuff there that I'm sure Jordan Peterson would talk about, with the feminine archetype, and this is why men are attracted to women in ways they shouldn't be, all that kind of stuff. But then Mary, as the second Eve, just as Christ is the second Adam, not in terms of molecules and stuff, but like Adam in the garden, just to be clear, you got to qualify everything these days. Although we are getting more free. So, there's that. Yes, I did look at you just to get a little nod back there. My wife is here. I've dragged her down here for a third time in a row. I don't know if she'll be here every night, but it's okay. Not that we're having marital problems, just for, just saying.
Everything's fine. I'm here by choice. I love being down here. When I can be here, I'll be here. When I can't, I won't.
Don't make it awkward. All right. So looking at this chart, basically, and this is the same thing that we saw in the Gallup poll yesterday, if you watched yesterday's episode. And I wanted to touch base on this fact. Yeah, that's my wife sharing out my stuff right there. But when I came down into the thread, there were even more good nuggets. Wall Street Silver says it was always the women, and above all the young ones, who were the most bigoted adherents of the party, the swallowers of slogans, the amateur spies and nosers out of unorthodoxy, George Orwell, 1984. And then there was this other guy who says that men are to blame, which I don't really know where he's going with that, and neither did the rabbit hole. But he posts another similar trend, and this is happening globally, which is particularly interesting. And so what these charts basically say is that the women are being radicalized towards liberal ideas, and men are moving more towards conservative ideas. And when we looked at the Gallup data yesterday, I didn't get a chance to pull it up. I should have had it for this one. But the women, when they end up being in their 30s to 40s, they tend to actually be more conservative. They trend towards conservatism. And so I thought, given all this stuff, in fact, actually, I saw that Trent Horn, who we're going to play a clip from him today on Our Lady of Fatima, he also did a video on this, on why women are going liberal. And what this basically means is that if the vector of the culture war is actually, from the left's perspective, attacking women and trying to get their ideology to be adopted by women, then that's the battle that we have to take as Christians, is to make sure that women understand what the role that they play in human prosperity actually is. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're also going to talk about Carrie Gress's book, The Anti-Mary Exposed, and tie in some of these ideas. And it all kind of fits together. I'm pretty excited about it, actually, because this apparition that is claimed to have happened in the Solovetsky monasteries in the 1700s basically appears to have been a prophecy about the Gulag. And the communists had a real feminist bent in a lot of their writings. And so we use Carrie Gress to kind of tie that thread together. But, basically right now, if you're really wondering how bad things are, the Babylon Bee did have a image that really captures what's going on. The protests of coronation of Aragorn, orcs announce sex strike, which, that might explain some of the Gallup data, just a little bit of fun there. But yes, these are problems. But also, there is good news, because according to Libs of TikTok, Alexandria Cortez, also known as AOC, used to have pronouns in her bio, and now she does not. And so we are winning on so many levels. In fact, I pitched to one of the Babylon Bee writers. They were like, what are we going to write about? We don't have anything funny to write about anymore. And I said, you should do a title, Public Confused Now About Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Gender because she removed her pronouns. So these are the things that we are going to talk about. But the reason why a lot of this matters is because the battle, even though we've won the election and all that kind of stuff, the battle is not over yet. We are still seeing things happen globally that are very concerning. For example, Peter Sweden, which is another great account to follow. He is a journalist, a Swedish journalist. He is now reporting that British police visited and questioned a journalist in her home because someone was offended by a year-old post on X. Yes, in Soviet Britain, you get interrogated for posting on social media. And if you want to be able to keep up to date on what's going on with that, you should definitely follow ADF International. They have tons of posts on there, so make sure you follow them. But ultimately, this is some pretty concerning data, and it definitely shows that where the left is pushing their efforts is in the battle for women. And this is true across the board. Like when you consider the fact when I was working in ministry and stuff, and I've got this clock now, so I'm going to wrap this up. When I was working in ministry and we were trying to do events, it was oftentimes that if you could convince the wife of a speaker, for example, that your event was great, there's a good chance that speaker was going to come and do your event. And so this idea is not new. It's just that old saying that, men are the head, but the woman is the neck, that just seems to be pretty true. And And so right now, based on these charts, people are pretty divided. So with all that being said, let's jump into this this segment of what was the apparition for the Gulag. And this comes out of Gulag Volume 2, Alexander Solzhenitsyn's book, the one that people rarely get to. And everybody's reading the abridged version now because, Jordan Peterson did a special abridged version. I think I have it on the floor here. Hold on just a second. This is the camera stuff. This is the one that you want. It's right here. And it's on what this version actually is this segment of the Gulag is basically about how the Gulag came to be. So if you read Volume 1, it's basically how bad the Gulag was and all of the atrocities that were there. And then it gets into Volume 2, and Volume 2 is basically this idea that people had no idea how evil the communist government had gotten. And so Solzhenitsyn takes you to this place called the Solovetsky Islands. And one of those places, I think I have a picture here. Let me see if I find it. Come on. Let's see here. It's in my documents. And I'm going to see if I can pull it up. If I got it. I did get it. Okay. So this is the Solovetsky bell tower. And so if you look at this, you can see this was the first site, according to Alexander Solzhenitsyn, where the Gulag actually happened. And what we're going to see next is that this was the named the Golgotha Crucifixion Monastery, according to its history. And for those that don't know, I was a Protestant first, and this particular story was very interesting to me because it's the reason, one of the big reasons why I became a Catholic. It's not the reason, but it is definitely part of the story of why I started searching. So, or investigating Catholicism more seriously, because Protestants, at least like me, when you hear about Marian apparitions, you just think, oh, whatever, it's just made up, it's just more Catholic propaganda or whatever. And what struck me about this is, well, you know what? I'm just going to read it to you and explain to you how I came about it, and then I'll tell you how it struck me. But basically, I was reading along and reading my Gulag stuff, and I'm really enjoying this. And as I'm reading, I'm realizing that, there's all these footnotes, and this is I use this quote all the time. This is why you do not do Audible, because otherwise you miss stuff like this. Because what I discovered in this whole episode that we're doing this on was that there was this apparition that occurred that was the reason for why this monastery was named what it was. And so this is what I was reading. This is like in the first 100 pages. There in the Golgotha church, prisoners lay dying from lack of food and from cruelty, enfeebled priests next to syphilitics, and aged invalids next to young thieves. At the request of the dying, and in order to ease his own problem, the Golgotha doctor gave terminal cases strychnine. And in the winter, the bearded corpses in their underwear were kept in the church for a long time. Then they were put in the vestibule, stacked standing up, since that way they took up less space. And when they carried them out, they gave them a shove and let them roll down Golgotha Hill. Now, at this point, if you're in the book, you're going to notice that there's a footnote. But if you were listening on Audible, you would not get the footnote. And so I love Audible. It's great if you want to get the superficial approach of things and you want to be able to just tell your friends that you read a book that you didn't really read. Totally get it. That's totally fine. What were you going to say?
Someone has chosen violence tonight.
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. Come at me, bro. Come at me, bro. Audible sucks. What do you got? What'd you say? I'm
just hearing what you're saying, Boo.
Yeah,
I'm
preaching.
What you're saying.
I'm preaching over here.
You preach.
Our kids are going to hear you when they're 20, and they're going to be like, "Mom, why did you call Dad Boo on a public podcast?"
I only do it for other people to hear. I never do it in private.
So anyway, as I'm reading this was as a Protestant, and I could not believe what I had read because Solzhenitsyn's not a Catholic. And so that's where this next quote comes in. And this is in the footnote again. He says, talking about the name of the monastery, "This is an unusual name for a church and monastery, not encountered anywhere else. According to legend, a manuscript of the 18th century in the State Public Library titled Solovetsky Patriarch, or The Lives of the Solovetsky Fathers, on June 18th, 1712, so keep in mind this is about 200 years before Stalin or anybody else is on the scene, the monk priest Job, which is also interesting, during an all-night prayer vigil at the foot of this hill, saw a vision of the Mother of God, quote, in all the glory of heaven, end quote, and she said to him, 'This hill from henceforth shall be called Golgotha, and on it shall be built a church and a monastery of the crucifixion, and it will be whitened by the sufferings of countless multitudes,' end quote. That is what they named it, and they built it there. But for more than 200 years, the prophecy was an empty one, and it did not seem likely that it would ever come true. But after the Solovetsky camp, one could no longer say this." So imagine for a minute that you're reading this and you go, this isn't an apologetic. And to be clear, this isn't an apparition that's been confirmed by the church or investigated by the Vatican or whatever, to my knowledge. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen. So the issue is that there is historical data that's 200 years old in apparently the state library. And just so everybody's aware, for those that don't know about Solzhenitsyn, one of the things that's unusual about his writing was how accurate it was, given the fact that he didn't have a lot of access to public documents because of the fact that the Soviets were so oppressive. He himself ended up spending time in the Gulag. And so I remember seeing this and being like, man, well, what am I supposed to do with that as a Protestant? Like, if this actually happened, what am I supposed to do about that? And this led to a lot of questions about, well, what do you do with any of the other apparitions, which I didn't really know about at the time. Now I know more about them because we're Catholic now, so everybody's all about the apparitions and the rosaries and all this kind of stuff. But you do really start to have to ask yourself, well, if these things are happening and my denomination says that they don't happen, well, then you either have to concur one of two things. People are lying, which would be very unusual considering the amount of people that do believe in these apparitions and the fact that the church has stated them or affirmed them, and a lot of these apparitions actually have monuments dedicated to them because of the phenomenon that happened. One of these is Our Lady of Fatima. Now, this one has been investigated by the church, and it has been validated. And hold on just a second. Let me get these slides set up real quick. And what's amazing is that I'm not the only one who has taken an interest in these apparitions as a Protestant, now Catholic, but there are other Protestants, in fact, Protestant scholars that have been approached by atheists about apparitions like Our Lady of Fatima. And Trent Horn has a great clip. He has the Council of Trent podcast, which you should totally go check out, especially if you are a Protestant, because 9 times out of 10, Protestants do not understand what Catholics even mean by any of their words. You know, there's Christianese and then there's Catholicese, and it's like it's like if Protestants had Christianese, that would be like the Greek, and then Catholicese would be like the Aramaic. You know, that's the stuff that like nobody ever reads or studies because after all, we have our English translations. But you should totally check that out. But this is what he says when he was in a debate on the topic of the resurrection, and I think it's worth taking a look at here.
My debate with Doug from Pine Creek on the resurrection, an audience member asked me about the miracle of Fatima. That was where 3 children claimed to have seen an apparition of the Virgin Mary in Fatima, Portugal in 1917. After they reported their encounter, a crowd of thousands of people gathered on October 13th. Many witnesses claimed the sun moved in extraordinary patterns across the sky, that it changed color, and that the ground and clothes that had been soaked by rain had become bone dry in a matter of minutes. Here's what I said about the appearances at Fatima.
I don't believe it's very possible that God caused an optical effect to occur to make it appear what normally you would not have naturally seen, that they saw that. Interesting here is we actually have better evidence for Fatima than for even the resurrection, because we have contemporary newspaper reports describing the event.
That guy didn't like that.
Like right the day after that it purportedly happened. We have contemporary accounts talking about puddles drying up and multiple witnesses describing it. So I do think there's very strong evidence for that.
The quote of the day here in this live stream is that we have better evidence for Fatima than the resurrections.
Doug acted as if this were a concession, and it might have been for someone who denies Marian apparitions. In fact, Protestant apologists who have looked at the evidence for Marian apparitions don't dismiss them as mere hallucinations. Instead, they're convinced that the people involved saw some kind of extramental or actually existing phenomena. Mike Licona puts it this way: Ehrman merely assumed.
For those that don't know, Mike Licona is probably one of the, now I have friends who are going to disagree with this, but he's definitely one of the lead scholars on the resurrection. If he's at least the most well-known, probably, next to Gary Habermas for anybody in the apologetics community. He's done a lot of stuff. And the seminary I went to, he actually came and did some debates while I was there, or right before I got there. And so the reality is that, you know, this guy really has done a lot of work on the resurrection. And so for him to say this is pretty telling.
Without any argument that visions of Mary are hallucinations. He states that groups had seen her. He admits that many of those experiencing the visions were educated professionals, including doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, engineers, and lawyers. Even Muslims apparently saw her, and the person perceived as being Mary was even photographed.
So who he's talking about, Mike Licona, the he that he's referring to is Bart Ehrman, who had challenged Mike Licona on, as far as I know, on the apparitions.
And in his book, The Resurrection of Jesus, A New Historiographical Approach, Licona admits the following: For myself, I am not prepared to adjudicate on the matter of Marian apparitions. Because I am Protestant, I carry a theological bias against an appearance of Mary. However, I am not predisposed to reject the reality of apparitions in general. It makes sense that Protestants would not explain Marian apparitions as being something like an improbable group hallucination, because that explanation would undercut their own arguments for Christ's resurrection. In my debate with Doug from...
So what we take from this is that a couple things. One, institutions actually do matter. The fact that Licona does not punt to the Bible for why he does not believe in apparitions, but essentially his church, Protestantism, is another affirmation of what Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about with the reality of hierarchies. They just exist. You cannot do anything meaningful without an institution that you're a part of. Now, you might be able to have an impact on individuals. I'm not saying that you can't have impacts individually amongst people. But as far as how you move or how you are able to become more than you ever could be by yourself, you have to have an institution. This is the principle in the military. This is the principle in the church. This is the principle in the family. It is better for man not to be alone, is what God says. And what we see with somebody like Licona punting to this Protestant bias is a pretty telling thing, because it basically says, well, I'm not going to follow the evidence wherever it leads because I might become Catholic. And that's a problem. Because if you're doing evidential apologetics, then why should an atheist listen to you if you're going to acknowledge, well, yeah, I basically pick and choose what I like based on my theological presuppositions. Basically, the Catholic Church can't be true because otherwise that would mean that I need to totally change, where I go to church. Who's commenting here? I see John MC. See the book, Solovicki, Roy Robinson, Yale University, chapter 16. Okay, I'll have to check that out. Thanks, John. It's probably some sort of refutation, which, well, if it is, let me know what that is. Just tell me. So one of the things that is important to understand here too is that even if this apparition in the Gulag isn't necessarily true, the reality is that if you start to read history, you do start to come across these things that are just phenomenon. So unless you're going to say they're aliens or demons, then you have to have a theological system and institution that allows you to consume them and incorporate them into your belief system. Otherwise, there's a lot of phenomenon out there that we just are going to say we don't have any idea, and so we don't need to believe it. And that is essentially what the atheists are doing with Christianity. A lot of them say, yeah, sure, maybe something happened in the Middle East 2,000 years ago, but it definitely wasn't the resurrection. Maybe something happened, in Lourdes, France, but it definitely wasn't an apparition to confirm that Mary was the Immaculate Conception. That would be crazy. That would mean Catholicism is true. And we have to remember that Christianity is not actually based on the Bible. It is based on the events that happened that produced the Bible. It's not merely words on a page that point us in the right direction on how to live our life. These are the words that tell us there was a miracle that happened in Israel, in Jerusalem, in Rome, where Jesus rose from the dead, and that is why we are Christians. That is why we are his disciples. His disciples did miracles. Their disciples did miracles, and so on and so forth. And so if we pull on that thread, we end up back in Rome. Now, the second part of this is, well, why does Mary even matter? Like for today's culture war, why would we even bring this up? And I think it's because women have forgotten the gift that Mary is to them. It's very easy for a man to relate to Christ. But if you think about it, it's a little bit weird for a woman to relate to Christ in the same way because Christ was a man. And similarly, it'd be weird for me to try, I've never read the Garden of Eden story and thought, Eve and I have a lot in common. I've never done that. And I'm sure that most men have never done that. And I guarantee you that if you're a conservative Christian person and you're in your churches and you're doing some exegetical preaching or whatever on the Garden of Eden, there's no way your pastor ever said, men, today I want us to take a look at Eve for how we can be better men, or how we can avoid screwing up. There's no way. Not a chance. Now, that doesn't mean that women can't have a relationship with Jesus. That's obviously not what I'm saying. But they relate to him as a woman, and I relate to him as a man. Similarly, if Mary is the new Eve, which makes a ton of sense, and all of the largest denominations have acknowledged this, it's only modern Protestants that have mud in their gears that really have a problem with this. And I'm speaking from my own position there. And hold on, John, you're interrupting the podcast again, but this is great. Describes the hill of Golgotha, etc., cities, the legend, apparition to the monk Job, and the hospital that was founded there. Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Man alive. You should totally subscribe to this channel, man. Or go to piousreflections.com. You can subscribe there too on my Substack. So at the end of the day, this Marian apparition stuff really does matter. Because Mary is actually an antidote, and we can see this from the data. The women are the vector of attack for far left ideology. And just look at how quickly men fall. I think it was Megan Basham was talking about this with J.D. Greer. There was a video going around. J.D. Greer, for those that don't know, was high up in the Southern Baptist Convention. And he was talking about how they had made all these positions for women and stuff. But which is fine. There's nothing wrong with women having jobs and those kinds of things. But the reality is that women do have a primary job, just like men have primary jobs. I can totally sit down and do my daughter's hair if I really have to. It's not going to turn out well, but I can do it. Although I am pretty good at brushing their hair. I am a little bit nicer on that. My wife can attest to that.
It's true.
But at the end of the day, these apparitions actually do have a real apologetic weight to them, but they also have a moral weight to them. That if Mary really is the ideal woman, the archetypal woman, and if what the church says about her is true, it's very interesting to me that the attack on the family would come not through the father, but through the mother. And if you look at who has the cultural power right now, it's women. And at the moment a woman cries wolf, a man is immediately investigated. And if you don't believe me, go watch the Red Pill documentary. It goes into all of this. The girl who did it used to be a Democrat, and then she did the Red Pill documentary. And that's one of the reasons why I think that's one of the reasons why the term got popularized. But there's this other book that I want to talk to you about called The Anti-Mary Exposed. And this is a quote that she has on the relationship between feminism and communism. And this is from Carrie Gress. Maybe I'll have her on the show if she sees this, or reach out to her. Let me know in the comments. But she says this: women's liberation. That's pretty small, so I'm going to bring this back. She says this in her book, The Anti-Mary Exposed, Rescuing the Culture from Toxic Femininity. And I did have some problems with the fact that there were a little bit of shoddiness on some sources, just, quoting something from something else. But again, that's not the end of the world. But she does say, women's liberation, the Bolsheviks believed, was completely tied to the success of communism. Russian revolutionary Inessa Armand emphasized this point in one pithy quote: "If women's liberation is unthinkable without communism, then communism is unthinkable without women's liberation," end quote. It was imperative that the idea of motherhood was divorced from the reality of being a woman. The official party position was stated by Alexandra Kollontai, the head of the Soviet Women's Department, who said, quote, "The shackles of the family, of the housework, of prostitution still weigh heavily on the working woman. Working women and peasant women can only rid themselves of this situation and achieve equality in life itself, and not just in law, if they put all their energies into making Russia a truly communist society," end quote. The Bolsheviks severed the tie between motherhood and womanhood. These same ideas would be echoed by the women's liberation movement in the West several decades later. Oh, continuity camera. Oh, my phone's dying. So at the end of the day, what this quote reveals is that the modern Western woman is essentially a communist. And I have like 60 seconds left. I'm looking at the clock. Kollontai. Okay. Kollontai. Okay. This is John is also educating us on how I should pronounce words. So at the end of the day, when we look at this quote, the Bolsheviks and the feminists of a modern America, and we look at those stats, have a lot in common. And this is something that is really easy to highlight with this fact. If I were to tell a man, you can be good at 3 things out of the 4. You can be good at your job, you can be good at your health, you can be good at your faith, or you can be good at being a dad. You can only be good at 3. Everybody would say, well, yeah, you should focus on, your faith. You should focus on being a dad, and you should probably focus on, your job. If you have to sacrifice your health for that, at the end of the day, you're going to be taking care of your family. You're going to be loving God, and sometimes that's just what you got to do. Now, women who have had kids already know all this. But if I were to tell a woman, you can be good at your job, you can be good at your health, you can be good at your faith, or you can be good at your mom, at being a mom. If you look at what the church is currently telling women today, it is this: you should be good at your job, you should be good at your church, and you should be healthy. Because churches are creating positions for women in their churches and saying, well, the men aren't stepping up, so we need women to step up. Then they're telling women, hey, you gotta be fit, you gotta be healthy, and you gotta make sure that you're staying in shape. And then and that's not for their husbands. It's just, hey, you should be healthy. And then the third thing they're telling them is, there's nothing wrong with you wanting to have a job, even if it means, you don't get to spend as much time with your kids as you'd like. Because after all, you're not just a mom, which is true. But somebody's going to have to explain why it is that the birth rate is so low. And it's not just because of the fact that, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. hasn't gotten into the head of Health and Human Services yet. It's because women have been fed a lie, not just from the culture, but also from the church. that their best life is in an office or in the office at the church or in the gym, rather than exercising their God-given potential that is completely and totally unique to them and totally connects them to the second Eve, which is Mary. And so if the church does not regain an appreciation for Mary, totus tuus, I believe it's called, totally yours is what Pope John Paul II said, to Jesus through Mary. And that doesn't mean that we're, trying to cut God out of it or any of that kind of stuff. It's the fact that there are too many saints, especially St. Maximilian Kolbe, which we'll talk about later, not tonight, but at another episode, who when they started to have a devotion to Mary, and John Paul II is another one, they really did begin to exemplify Christ, and women as well. And so, what I hope you take away from this episode is that we need, whether you're Protestant or Catholic, we need to understand that there are incredible theological riches. Maybe you can't adopt the whole perpetual virginity thing, but the holiness aspect, you should at least be able to grant she was holy, that she was a holy woman. And start there. And for the Catholics, we all know the statistics around women and contraceptives in the Catholic Church. They have to regain an appreciation of what it means to imitate Mary in their lives. Because if the women start to imitate Mary, I think the men will start to imitate Christ. With that, that's all I got. Have a great day. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment, share it with your friends. Have a good night, everybody. Keep thinking.